we've got Councillor Keza Mahmood, Mark Townsend, Pat Varty, Chris Dixon, also Michael Lee has gone, David Whip and Councillor Armistead and Councillor Pattison attending in her place.
Do we need another attendance sheet, or can you work
I can work it out, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, minutes of the meetings on the 4th of December and the 31st of January. Everybody happy with those minutes? Any amendments? No? Okay. So declarations of interest. Anybody got declarations of interest they haven't already made? Nope. Public questions? Do we have any public questions? No. So I think it's over to you, Andrew. Performance update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending Police and Crime panel. I will just briefly talk through the update report and take it as read. For those members that are new to the panel, I provide an update on the work that I've been doing to aid the panel in scrutinising my work as Police and Crime Commissioner. Usually there is also accompanied with this a performance pack that links to the performance of the constabulary, which is basically an onward submission of the accountability board, but we haven't held an accountability board in the intervening time. It's actually next week, so that will come to the subsequent police and crime panel. Obviously, given the meeting that we've just had, a significant amount of work since we last met has been the recruitment process for a new chief constable, and I don't think I need to say anything more on that, given what we've had. There's some information there about the budget consultation, and that was updated to the preset panel, but just to make sure that it's in here. One of the big focuses is now just over a year since Operation Warrior was launched, which is delivering on the police and crime plan priority of disrupting and dismantling organised crime. The new target teams, the task forces, the roads crime team, those new units that have been put in to deliver against that priority are absolutely delivering. And I'm sure many of you know that one of my favourite pastimes in this job is to go out on drugs raids with the constabulary and go out on warrants. And the officers, the passion they have for doing this and having the time now. It's not about doing the actual raid, it's about mapping the organised crime gangs, it's about building the intelligence, the community intelligence, and feeding that through into targets and operations. And there's some brilliant results that we can see there. Since Operation Warrior launch, arrest of crime gang suspects are up by 35%. Cash seizures from organised crime gangs are up by 103%. The amount of jail time for organised crime gang members is up 25%. The number of cannabis plants seized is up by a whopping 250%. And the number of Class A and B drugs seized has been increased by 200%. And I would like to put on note my thanks, not just for the efforts of the officers and staff that are involved in it, but the bravery that is involved in it. It's quite unnerving no matter how many times you've done it. That moment you put a door in, you go through and you don't know what's on the other side. And there's some quite violent situations that develop. So my thanks to officers. The other area of campaigns, two that I'll briefly highlight, Op Centurion, continuing to deliver on the antisocial behaviour hotspot patrolling. There's some really good stats that are outlined there. Over 14,000 additional policing hours have been delivered through that through Op Centurion, and the £2 million we were awarded to fund additional tours of duty to target antisocial behaviour. And as a reminder, there's one antisocial behaviour hotspot area in each of the 14 areas of Lancashire, and they're all operational and live at the minute. And we're seeing real strong increases in public confidence across the board in the antisocial behaviour hotspot areas. Everyone came to me with this really excited, to which my response was, who knew people like to see bobbies on the beat? So it works. The drink and drug driving campaign that happened over Christmas has continued through the creation of the Roads Policing Team, has resulted in over 300 arrests for drug and drink driving over the Christmas period. Safer Lancashire Neighbourhoods funding allocations. As you all be well aware, the money that we seize off criminals now all goes into the Safer Lancashire Neighbourhoods Fund, and I love the poetic justice of giving criminals cash back to local communities to help make them more resilient to crime in the future. which is wonderful. And as part of the report, I've listed all of the grants that have been given since this panel last met. And as you'll see, there is a really, really good spread of grants in terms of geography and also in terms of the different measures and ways in which people are trying to make communities resilient, divert ASB, support young people, and other projects. And then there's some other, on page 8 or 21, whichever page number you're looking at, basically some other things that I've done since, such as the observation of major event policing, the work we did in Neighbourhood Policing Week, the varying work that we've done with working with partners, and the Extraordinary Accountability Board that we held recently to review the progress the constabulary has made in its action plans for the actions that were specifically given to the constabulary from the independent external review of the missing person investigation into the Nicola Bully case. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Yep. Any questions from that? Yeah, Margaret and then Gareth. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. I just wondered, do you go into schools to talk about knife crime? Because my grandson was threatened in Lancaster. I did send him an email about it. And with a piece of barbed wire. He's 13. And, you know, my daughter did report it, but nothing, absolutely nothing. It was brushed aside. The officer rang my daughter and he was quite threatening. And I just wondered if you do go into schools and talk about knife crime, you know, a barbed wire, anything that could be a weapon.
Thank you very much, and I've taken action for Angela as the head of my office to get in touch with you about the specific incident. More broadly, yes, we've funded several projects over the years to do that, and part of what we heard from the Chief Constable before, bread and butter of neighbourhood policing should be going into schools and talking to people. And now that we've got the dedicated officers, we do want to see much more of that. Particularly when the Knife Angel was here, and obviously the Knife Angel's coming back to Lancashire, we're funding programme of activity around knife awareness as well around that, particularly engaging with young people.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions, nothing too challenging for you, but just on the back of what we just heard from the Chief Con around always trying to improve, it's possibly well timed. I had prepared them previously, so feedback from West Lancs, but probably quite relevant across the piece. The first one is just around Centurion, and with its apparent success, will there be opportunities for additional locations within districts? Because obviously residents in other areas of West Lancs are now asking, can we have that here? The second one is around another, seems to be relatively successful rural task force, and whether there's any further resource going into that, and whether any further off-road vehicles for tackling these dangerous A-roads, rural areas. And the third one is around nuisance bikes and quads and all that sort of stuff, and whether there's, again, is there any sort of available resource to combat like for like, so they're not spinning up cut-throughs and easily getting away then from police cars, which obviously can't handle that. So I'm sure they're all things you've had in your inbox anyway previously.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the Centurion has become a victim of its own success very largely, which is I now get lots of areas asking me for Centurion hotspot areas because of how successful they are. The key thing for me is you've got to be, it's a finite amount of money and it's got to be targeted to work. So what we've agreed is as part of that, the idea of the Centurion Hotspot Patrol areas is to basically provide a significant visible presence way above and beyond the already increasing amount of resource that is going into neighbourhood policing, so that people will see bobbies on the beat more anyway. What we'll do is that the additional operation is to basically give the police and partners, and West Lancs is a prime example where actually the working relationship between the police and the council has been exemplary around Centurion, and we've been in meetings about it ourselves, and the public protection team have been brilliant. It's to give all the partners the breathing space to be able to tackle some of the root cause issues. The patrols help identify and map the offenders, identifying the locations and dealing with all that. We review the performance of the Centurion areas on a quarterly basis. What we've said is we don't want these areas to move round willy-nilly. They need to be a sustained presence in an area for a period of time to actually address some of the underlying problems. Now, that will be different for different areas of the county. So looking to Chorley, to your right, is a slightly different makeup to West Lancashire in terms of the population is concentrated largely in one main town centre. And the idea that in Chorley, the Op Centurion hotspot is going to need to move to other areas of the borough to do that kind of high intensity patrolling is probably less likely than, for example, in West Lancs, where you've got much more equalised townships around the district. So what we'll be doing is reviewing. What we said, we want to leave it to work for a year. So we wanted to leave everything in place for a year, partly because the Home Office wanted us to anyway, to prove it works. And then once we've done that, we'll review all the areas on a 3-monthly basis going forward. And if all the evidence points to the fact that Centurion has worked and a normal level of neighbourhood policing presence will suffice because the root causes have now been dealt with, it can then move on to other areas within that district. And my commitment is that each district will always have one on Hot Centurion, so it will never move out of West Lancs. There'll always be one in West Lancs that will move around. On the Rural Task Force, yes, so we put extra resources into the Rural Task Forces. Geographic spread from when they were first launched meant that they were getting moved around an awful lot operationally. Now, the conversation we've just had, what the Rural Task Forces do on a day-to-day basis and how they're deployed is firmly in the camp of the Chief Constable. There was a resourcing conversation with myself around the fact that we didn't think we had quite enough task forces to map it. So an additional task force was put in last year, which is towards the end of the last calendar year. That's now set up in the Fylde area because the other areas such as the South Task Force was being called in an awful lot to help do, so hopefully will mean that they stay in their area an awful lot more. On nuisance bikes, it's a real, and quads, there's been some brilliant seizures over the last few weeks and months. They're on social media and I'm really encouraging the police to push out on social media when they seize scrambler bikes and quad bikes. There's some good results in Rossendale, some good results in Blackpool, and some good results up in Rivington recently, and making sure that they're doing that. Getting the police to pursue other scrambler bikes on scrambler bikes comes with a whole host of other issues around legitimate use of force and risk. So if someone is then injured subsequently, as we've seen in some very recent high-profile cases, if the police pursue an offender who isn't committing any serious criminal offence that necessarily presents risk and threat, and they deploy, for example, pursuing them, not necessarily in a scramble bike, but say in a van, and then cause serious injury to the individual, the question will then be, was that a proportionate use of force? And then that's where police forces then come under real scrutiny. So the things that we're looking at is about how we use technology to get much smarter. And again, some of this is about working with the real task forces. The key thing to understanding is once they're up on the moors, we'd need an army of people to chase them round, but they've got to come off the moors at some point and leave. So actually, the increased use of drones, for example, so send a drone up, so then you can spot where they're going, where they're coming, and that's largely where they've been caught the last few times, is the police running targeted operations, which catches them where they load and unload. And once they're on the road, that's a different story. Hopefully that's helpful.
Michael and then Peter.
Thanks, Madam Chairman, and thank you for your report. Glad to see lots of progress being made. Can I just touch on the drink and drug driving campaign, which we put some funding into as well? Really pleased to hear that was successful, but has there been any press coverage on the back of that and getting messages across to people moving forward?
Yeah, thank you. And it should have added, it's remiss of me that it was a partnership approach to the publicity and engagement that was around it. Yeah, it was picked up quite a lot in the press. I was invited onto Radio Lancashire and things like that. We also did an outdoor advertising campaign, in particular things like the caps on fuel, when people are filling up, basically with the numbers, in the last 12 months. I think this is right, the last 12 months, 1,309 people have been arrested for drug or drink driving in Lancashire. So that's a big number that you put out there, and a real clear campaign around asking people to report other people that they know are drink or drug driving. So there's been quite a lot of time and effort spent on publicising those messages, and we'll continue to try and do that as much as we can, because we want the message to be out there, which is don't do it in the first place.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. So, being the Armed Forces lead for WIRE, it was nice to see in your report about the veterans and communities. Some good work to do with that. So, it's nice and pleasing to see something like that in there. So, thank you.
It was a really, really good visit, and one of the things that was drawn out of it, which is a lot of people who've retired from policing, don't realise, they don't necessarily categorise themselves as veterans, but actually a lot of these organisations, such as Veteran Communities, is for retired blue light people as well. And actually, retired cops, particular ones in certain types of jobs, will have seen far more trauma than any of us can imagine during their career. And having those community organisations to support them if they need that support, alongside veterans who've been through trauma, and being able to relate to other people, I think is really, really powerful. And I was really good to visit and promote the work that they're doing.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. What was the split on the arrest for drink driving? Was the drugs the predominant number of arrests, or was it drink? 'Cause I was pleased to see that it was heavily advertised and emphasised that drug testing would take place, which I think is a good thing. I think it needed to happen. I just wondered if you got a split on that. And the other question I wanted to mention, I did raise at I think a previous meeting about unauthorised entry onto land. Thinking mainly it tends to be travellers. There is this expedited process that the police can use powers to stop this unauthorised entry, particularly if crime is being committed. Has that been agreed, that process been agreed with the Chief Constable? Because I think at the time it wasn't, and it was left to local authorities to take court actions in Magistrates' Court to sort out the issue. Have you been able to sort that one out?
In terms of drink and drunk driving, I don't have the actual numbers to hand in terms of the split. It's predominantly drink driving, just because that presents itself more obviously, and people tend to report that more. Drug driving is increasing in terms of the number of arrests, and the key message to get out there is the swab tests that the police used to be incredibly expensive. They're now about 50 quid a pack, and then it's a couple of £100 to do the test after the scientific test afterwards. So the message out there now is the Roads Policing Unit will drug swab you, and it's no longer unaffordable for police forces to be doing that. So a significant increase in the number and targeting of drug swabbing is really important. And secondly, the law used to be that the police had to be, or the CPS had to be able to prove when you'd taken the drugs, because drugs can stay in your system quite a long time, whereas that doesn't apply anymore. So the police, if there's drugs in your system, it's for you. That's it, done. So there's a real, very, very low challenge rate of the drug swab testing, and the drug swabs that most police forces use in the country are made right here in Lancashire, in a Lancashire business. On the unauthorised encampments, I'm not sure on the particular detail about the actual process and where they're up to on that. There is some complications with that process around where it applies, what thresholds apply, particularly around vulnerability and people who tend to regularly use illegal use of land. Have a very good way of getting around the systems themselves. What we have done, and I know we'd had conversations about this, the powers and the processes that the constabulary had at its disposal were not being used consistently across the force in the most robust way that we would want them to. And there's been a piece of work that's been led by a senior police officer since then to give a really clear direction to frontline staff and officers in the constabulary around what powers you have, when they're applicable, and equally, here is a really simplified process for how you do it. Because what you tend to find is officers they say we're using this process, they get challenge on the site. It's the first time the officer's ever done it, so they don't know what the challenge is they're doing right or not. So real clear policies, real clear procedures. We had a meeting where it was presented to me. I had some feedback for them from a partner's perspective and from a governance perspective. So once we've got the final draft of that policy around how the force are going to do that, I'm sure we can share it in confidence with you.
Can it be shared with the local authorities? I think it's important that people know what you're going to do and what they've got to do.
It might have to be a redacted version, but for certain elements that are internal, but and for certain elements we wouldn't want in the public domain about where we think there are weaknesses, for example. But yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Just touching on the funding allocations that you made for Safe Lancashire Neighbourhoods, and really supportive of the idea of taking funds from criminals to make Lancashire safer. It's a really great initiative. But in terms of the schemes that you've actually chosen to fund, do we as a panel get feedback on this in a few months' time to see how these schemes have actually made a difference in individual communities across the county?
Yeah, so we do individual reports and assessments off the back of each grant. So there's members of staff in my office who do that. It's not something that's currently reported to Police and Crime Panel because the assessments are varied in their nature depending on the nature of it. So some of it, some of it's harder to measure than others, for example. So some of it you've got to take a chance on. So, for example, supporting the vulnerable victims who've suffered violence or rape and supporting them and helping give them that resilience so hopefully they're not re-victimised is very difficult to prove the success of because you don't know the benchmark in that sense. Other things, which is we've funded CCTV because the park sheds keep getting burnt down, whatever. Well, the park sheds are now not getting burnt down. So some of it's easy, some of it's easier than others to measure. But each one of these reports has each one of these projects, has a post-project assessment done by the office to demonstrate value for money. That gives you assurance.
Thank you. Any more comments? So we're asked to note the report, which we have. Moving on to item 6. Again, it's Andrew, Police and Crime Commissioner, decisions.
Yes, so you got the report of the decisions that I have made as Police and Crime Commissioner, the formal decisions that need to be obviously reported. As you see, largely Safe Lancashire Neighbourhoods Fund, our financial positions with Treasury Management, and that is it. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for that report? Again, I think it's just for noting. So moving on to the task and finish groups. I think, Miranda, sorry. Yes, Miranda, thank you.
Yes, on behalf of Rich and myself, we've made some progress. We've got some meetings scheduled with a number of groups. We might not necessarily be able to involve all members because we've struggled with diaries, but if at least 2 of us can get there, then we'll do that and report back in afterwards. And thank you to the OPCC for links and support in getting into colleagues from Constabulary.
That is really useful. It's really difficult, I think, to do the timing of these groups actually and to be able to report because, of course, the makeup of this committee might completely change for the next meeting. Not for the independents, I'm sure, but for the rest of us. But I think the task and finish groups are a really important part of this committee, actually. Does anybody have any comments? Have you got an update for Mark?
Yeah, just a short verbal one from Councillor Mark Townsend. He's on holiday, but work's continuing with that group, the violence against women and girls, and he's looking to report back at the AGM, notwithstanding the fact, like you say, subject to panel membership, but they're getting towards the final report stages now.
Thanks. So I'm sure they'll be interested. Can I just ask, actually, Phil, sorry, Andrew, are they available for public, the task and finish group report?
Yeah, because they will submit to the panel.
Yeah.
It'll be in the panel agenda when it's ready. Yeah.
That's good. Okay.
Yep.
Andrew.
I was just going to add, just because obviously Councillor Townsend isn't here, I've met with him and the task and finish group twice now. We've had, we did kind of like a scoping meeting when they first started out, and I've met with them again since they've had chance to go and talk to different teams and to different partners. We had a really lengthy discussion around their findings, which I thought was really good to have that pre and post match kind of conversations. So I thank the task and finish group for their time as well in looking at what's a really, really important area.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Peter?
Just a quick thanks, Chair. Just a quick one on that. We last met on the 1st of February with the PCC, and just to say thanks to Richard and Mark. We did a lot of work on this, and a lot of it was eye-opening, to say the least. I would imagine we were quite surprised at some of the things that we found out. But Mark did a sterling job on taking minutes, and I'm sure his report will be absolutely fantastic when it comes forward. So just to say a big thank you to him as well.
His minute taking is to be commended. I must admit. In our discussion, he was pulling back, and Richard was pulling back notes from conversations 4 months ago and throwing them back at me, so it was good.
Okay, any more comments on those? Nope, thank you. Item 8, the meeting dates, which are as they are. Yep, the timetable of meetings. A verbal update of the complaints. Sorry, I said. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. There's only one purported complaint, and it relates to the matter that the subcommittee dealt with last year. So it's going to be very easy for me to look at the regulations to say it's the same matter. It's nothing. There's nothing new. It seems to me he's not accepting the decision of the decision that we made. So I think I would probably politely going back to him and say to him, sorry, under regulations, I won't entertain this anymore.
Could I just ask, Hassan, at what point do you say it's a vexatious complaint and we haven't got resources to spend on this?
Yeah, I think this is a sort of repetitious one. Yeah. There's nothing new from what we already know. I think it's just somebody who's very persistent. He's been told as to what the recourse is and what he needs to do. So I don't think I'm going to say anything more than that. But I think perhaps when we come back here after July, I think we do need to have some kind of process for dealing with vexatious. And I'll probably suggest a procedure as to how we deal with that. Maybe sort of bring it here and tell you as to what the nation that we can resolve as a whole. That this is a vexatious matter.
Item 10, the PCC elections, May 2024. I said again.
So as this is the sort of the last meeting before the elections, so just thought I'd just give you a quick sort of verbal update as to where we are. So I mean, I'm also involved in the elections. Just to let you know that the Blackburn Acting Return Officer has been now designated the PARO, the Police Area Return Officer. Elections, as you know, is on the 2nd of May. The police force area consists of 14 councils. So it's Blackburn 2 unitaries and the 12 districts. And some of the authorities have just got the PCC standalone, lucky, and some of us like us in Blackburn, we've got the locals, third locals, plus we've got 5 parishes, and I think there's a lot of other areas of Lancashire who's got local elections at the same time as well. We don't know yet whether we're going to combine general or not. I think we've heard different things, but it's still a possibility. It could be on the same day. In which case, it's going to be very hard work for us. What I've done so far on behalf of the PARO is I've issued directions to the 14 local area returning officers in terms of the planning and organisation as to how they should be doing, and they are complying with those directions. We've had the registers back, etc., etc. One of the things is in relation to the count and verification. The count is going to take place on Friday the 3rd of May. So we've directed that we want the verification figures by 1 o'clock on the Friday, 3rd of May, and we'll start the count. It's going to be a mini count, so it's going to be counting different sort of 14 areas of Lancashire at 2 o'clock. And if there's a general election, then we're going to start at 3 o'clock. It wasn't entirely popular with some of the other sort of election services managers across Lancashire, but that's what we've directed. I will be issuing supplementary directions, a bit more detail about the verification of the count. That's going to be, I'm going to probably time that just after the 26th of March. Then we'll definitely know whether there's going to be a general election or not. One important change about the election this year is the voting system. Now it's first past the post. So before we had the first, second choice, that's not gone. Legally, it's just first past the post. And what we're going to do is we're going to coordinate all the results in Blackburn, and then we will sort of work everything out, and we'll declare the results here. So it'll be all done at King George's Hall in Blackburn. So that's a quick sort of update from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody with any questions about that? Okay. Urgent business, I don't think we've got.
Chair, I don't know if this qualifies as urgent business. Oh, thank you.
Just to, if you'd like to mention it, Miranda.
On Thursday last, Ruth Hennig, Baroness Hennig, passed away. She was a former county councillor, former chair of the Lancashire Police Authority, and was actually very instrumental in the passing of the legislation in the creation to create police crime commissioners, in the creation of police and crime panels as a body to hold the commissioner to account. And I felt that it would be appropriate today to mention that, which I said to Phil.
I think it certainly is appropriate. I think we should minute our sympathies to the family. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Want to, Roger? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's not urgent, but when myself and Phil Llewellyn and Assad sort of attended the conference of the police and crime panels of England in Coventry, one of the things that was mentioned as encouraging the public to know what the work of the police and crime panel was to have like an annual report of the work of the panel of the previous year, and we thought it was a good idea to get it across to the public, you know, what we are doing and what we've done in the past years. So and my suggestion, Chair, is that officers, if everyone's happy, officers prepare a report of the work of the last year, which could include the task and finish groups, of course, and then we can have a look at it at the AGM, and then hopefully it can then be subject to a press release if that's the feeling of everyone, and passed on to the local authorities as well, of course, what we are doing to tend to the interests of the public of Lancashire.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. We were talking in the break actually about the fact that it would be a good idea, I think, to invite the new Chief Constable, whoever that may be, and the new Police and Crime Commissioner, whoever that may be, to the next meeting to give us their plans. Does that happen as a matter of course?
It's usually the second meeting after the AGM, so the
Right.
September-October meeting, that's dedicated to the Chief Constable coming.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if the Commissioners change as well,
Yeah.
like I say,
Who knows?
who knows?
Okay, so long as we are kept informed of any plans, yeah, that's fine. Anybody
I think
else?
as well, Chair, I was just going to add, I think even if the Commissioner doesn't change in each term, we are required by law to develop a police and crime plan to send to the Home Secretary, and that will by its nature come through the police and crime panel.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you. Any more comments? My laptop has died. Okay, so officially close the meeting. Thank you very much.